Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, here we are again with another session with the Turbulence author, David Banmiller. David, lovely to see you again, my friend.
And hello to you, Chris.
Yeah, really nice. I won't be smiling too much because I've just knocked I've knocked a front tooth off. So if I'm not looking my best, I do apologise.
I don't know. You look pretty good to me, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Right, here we are, chapter 13, session 15, and great title, which is, chartering the best course for the future, which is very apt, I think, at the moment. And it's our last full chapter, David. So we've still got some extra sessions that we're going to have a blast with. So we'll still do the epilogue, acknowledgements, and both of the appendices, and a few little off-the-cuff or off-piste pointers, which we'll come to later on. But last chapter, it's been an absolute pleasure, David. And I know that this week you were on CNBC, and it was well received as well. So, it's been a really, really enjoyable journey. And every time somebody says the word turbulence now, the first person that will come into my mind is yourself. So brilliant.
I got a lot of good comments. I got a lot of good comments on CNBC's. A lot of people watch it around the world, apparently, from Spain, Dubai, the US, and some pilots, because I was a little bit rough on management. I was, you got to be a little provocative. Otherwise, you're just another talking head. And Brian Sullivan, who's kind of a tough guy in interviews, he was very accommodating, and he talked about the book a lot. And I had given him a lot of thoughts in advance. And I mean, he really knows what he's talking about. He's a good guy. And it was wonderful. But I said, and he was very blunt. He said, it looks like management missed the mark. I mean, what were they doing about forecasting July 4th weekend? And, pilot shortage is severe right now, and they're flying their max 100 hours per month per FAA regulations. And I said, the vice president of planning is the hardest job in the industry, because normally you have all these metrics to forecast based upon history and data. That's out the window. I mean, the historical data doesn't mean anything, right? Yeah. And then between the vaccines, venues opening up, theme parks, the 737-800 MAX coming back on, and huge pent-up demand. And by the way, it's not just airlines. The airports, TSA is short 6,000 people. Yeah. The hospitality industry is short. But I did suggest, honestly, that the industry missed the mark in forecasting. And Brian said, I saw this coming a long time ago. And he didn't take any credit. He said, look, I really don't know these things. And then he mentioned a flight his friend took on Singapore, from LA to Singapore. There was more crew members than passengers.
Well, that's crazy. But I think this fine balance of having gone for so long, keeping not just keeping one eye, but keeping almost both eyes on the cost leadership side of the business, that has caused so many people so many worries as to when to start having people back. And it's a shame that the industry didn't come together and sort of support a reservoir of capable people who could be called back and multitask across various services, whether it be at airports, across airlines, across handling companies, etc., so that there was more people readily available, trained, fully available, and up to the mark. Well,
the problem, Chris, is primarily the pilots. And I flew back a week or two ago, and we still don't have indoor dining in Ireland. It's ridiculous. But in any case, we only had 20% load factor on the flight back from Philadelphia to Dublin, and the US is a lot stronger, especially Southwest. But the problem is, in the pilots, you don't flick a switch. I mean, you can bring back temps and so on, but the pilots, a lot of them took early retirement.
Yeah.
Some furloughs, not a lot, because the US government, gave them a lot of money, 50 billion or something. And some of them just took not just early retirement leaves, and you have to go through recurrent training. And I can't imagine the pressure now on simulators, just as an example. To get pilots back up to speed. They're the biggest impediment right now. And Southwest offered the pilots like double pay, and Delta, I think, offered free passes for a year, all kinds of incentives for flight attendants. But pilots was the biggest problem. And then weather hit, and then they had Florida weather problems, and it's just a combination of everything over July 4th weekend. It was a mess.
Yeah. That's why I think Turbulence is the most suitable title for this book.
Yeah.
Whenever we're on a flat playing field or a new road or something goes well, as soon as something goes well, you think to yourself, well, I better prepare myself now for the next one, but nobody knows what the next one's going to be. I mean, it's an incredible industry, and it's still such a fantastic industry. But my God, the agility and the pivot that's necessary nowadays is absolutely amazing.
Try moving. I describe it as an elephant or turning the Queen Mary. You've got, let's say American Airlines has a fleet of roughly 1,000, maybe a little bit less now because they get rid of some airplanes. And then you got, I don't know, like 20,000 pilots and co-pilots alone. And you've got to track and monitor all them. So when you go behind the curtain on the scheduling piece, that takes months, if not years, to schedule airplanes, routes, new airplanes, getting rid of old airplanes. What's the demand? And those forecasts are all upside down. So the guys that typically map all that out, including the pricing model, which is based upon demand forecasts, is just, it's upside down. And it's probably going to be that way for a while. I don't.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I think Turbulence is going to be around for some time, David. But something that was mentioned in there, and there's a big reference to him, and fair play to him because he did make a big impact on the business. But you talk about pioneers, and one of them being Richard Branson.
Yeah.
And obviously, he's had lots of secrets for success. But one of the things that he's known for, and Virgin, is that they dared to be different, And that difference now really sets the tone for where we are, because like you said, everything that's of knowledge now is previous. It's all yesterdays. And now we have to look at how we manage today to make tomorrow a much better, leaner, meaner, and more sustainable operation moving forward. So, that dare to be different is necessary for everybody to embrace now moving forward.
I mentioned in the book, and I was making some notes beforehand about Branson and Virgin. He's got a couple of talents. One, of course, he's a great marketer in public. I mean, I've met him a couple of times. He's very quiet and private. He doesn't sort of look the same. He's got a lot of different companies. I think, I'm told, he can be a tough taskmaster. But having said that, let me give you an example of what he said to a lot of people, and I noted in the book, that take care of your crew members and your employees, and then that will carry over to interface with customers, right? So now a couple of years ago, I'm at Half Moon in Montego Bay, which is a beautiful resort. I go there a lot in Jamaica. And every Monday, the manager has a cocktail party for new people. And the crew are there, Virgin crew, overnighting at Half Moon, which is double the price of the Holiday Inn and every other hotel around there, right?
Yeah.
And I was chatting with the captain, and I said, I've been a CEO, and I don't know that we put people up, because you're always arguing with crew. There's hospitality and crew committees that negotiate hotels around the world for airlines as part of the ALPA and all the different unions, well, flight attendants and pilots. And I said, so how'd you get this gig? And he said, well, Richard Branson feels that if we really have a nice time while we're overnighting, or 2 nights in Montego Bay, then that's going to carry over to our interface with passengers when we leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. That's a true story. He to me. And I thought about that. So when you think economics, most CEOs, and it's much lower than a CEO level in terms of crew planning and where they stay. And you negotiate with hotels on good rates, and there's security issues because the crew members, they advanced taking them to their hotels, especially after 9/11. And they get some say, a fair amount of say actually, in where they stay. I mean, I got involved in that a lot when I was running Europe for American. And to have Branson do that, I thought was interesting because it cost him a lot more money than the normal overnight stay for crew members.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, David, it's a customer's business centered on customers. And if everybody realizes that we all fly at one point or another, almost, but this generation and the next generations, I mean, flying is it's just something that people take for granted. But the fact that we're all customers, including those that are delivering customer service, if companies now start to get that right by daring to be different and thinking different and focusing on that customer leadership model, it's going to make a big difference, because people are now going to start savoring and realizing, what's important or what they want, which also means that if you go to the other end of the scale, and you also mentioned in your book something that Bill Murphy from Ryanair said, which was, we're low cost mean bastards. So you've got both sides or both ends of the spectrum. But from the Ryanair bit, they basically under promise and over deliver, because they're saying this is all you get, this is it, this is it, this is it. And at the end of the day, an awful lot or a big proportion of customers, what they want is low fares, and they're happy with the lack of political correctness. So you've got both ends there, and everybody else who decides whether they go north or south of with it, whichever extreme. So I think this is really going to be interesting, and it's going to be exciting opportunities now as we come out of this pandemic, with the understanding that once things get to a level where people associate that we have to live with it, we can't fight it, we have to live with it, and we have to improve the way we defend against it, but we've got to get on with our lives.
Well, a couple of points in that regard. I sent a copy of Turbulence to Michael Leary, who runs Ryanair, and his office is right around the corner from where I live. And he sent me a nice long letter like a day later.
Yeah.
And he suggested I do Turbulence 2 post-COVID. I'm not sure I'm prepared for that, but he's a little bit different in private than in public. But he made Europe and Ireland when he came in with those super low fares, and he said, listen, if you want to check bags and bother our agents and be in reservations calls for 20 minutes and so on, you're going to pay for it.
Yep.
If you want to pack very little bags and do everything online and so on, you're going to fly for less. And he stimulated the economy of not only Ireland for sure. You talk to cab drivers and anybody in this community, they love O'Leary because of what he did. He's opened them up to run down to Spain for weekends and so on. Then you take that model, which is, I would call severe in customer service. And then you take, and he's very blunt. He said, hey, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. But now you take models like JetBlue, which when they came out years ago, and I knew Dave Nealman pretty well, the founder, they took the obvious different direction, very, very much into customer service. And now there's a couple of startups, Chris, in the US popping up. One's out of Burbank, and another one, I think, is out of Las Vegas. And their focus is more or less what you said. They're going to really focus on customer service. So you have three models, right?
Yep.
Let's call it the legacy model, which is like turning to Queen Mary, right? Because you can't just instantly change. And then you got the low cost carriers. And then you got these startups that are saying, well, wait a second, let's go secondary airport to secondary airport. Let's really be nice to folks and let's offer good service at low prices. And of course, they're modeled because they're startups and they're probably getting really cheap airplanes right now.
Yep.
That, and with no labor agreements, at least probably for a few years, that they may make it. I mean, it's a tough business, but it's going to be interesting how that landscape changes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's a couple over here that are waiting to kickstart low cost into India and back. And I mean, they're two slightly different models, but they're really focusing on such a huge population and getting access. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. But this COVID issue and the testing and who's going to accept who, etc., that's going to play out. I think this is not going to be the best of summers, apart from for the domestic markets, which are able to do very well. It's not going to be the best of summers. I think it's going to be another disastrous winter. But touch wood, please God, next year things will start to pick up, which is where what you said at the beginning of the show, the forecasting and how they prepare has got to be right now for next 2022.
Yeah, it does. It's going to be a tough model to develop. I think it can be done. Behind the scenes for folks that are watching is there were models developed years ago that had to do with pricing and yield management. So they took years and years of history, like Wednesday before Thanksgiving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon between Tulsa and Dallas, what's the demand? And they put those into the computer, and then 60, 90, 30 days out, they flash and say, hey, we need more cheap seats, or increase the price, the demand is high. And the virtual nesting concept, which is kind of complicated, I'm not sure I totally understand it, but it's very sophisticated, to track that and forecast the future. Now, those models will be updated. I think the summer's been unusual. Yeah. Obviously, vaccines coming back, huge pent-up demand. The inconsistencies between cities, states, and countries vis-a-vis the COVID issue and immigration and filling out forms beforehand. I'm a dual citizen. When I came back, I had to fill out a form and quarantine for at least 5 days until I got my test done, which I got at the airport, and they monitored where I was. And can you imagine somebody that's a business guy right now? He's not going to go through that quarantine issue. So the quarantines have to be resolved. The politics have to be resolved. The science has to be more robust. And I think over time, the science is going to be a result of experience, which is always the case, right? Yeah. Over a period of time, you're going to learn, and the science and the problems with the Delta variant are going to be massaged a bit, and vaccines have become more sophisticated. So over time, I think it'll catch up. But in the meantime, I'll tell you, traveling, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. You should have seen the lines in the US, in LA, Chicago, Denver. I mean, you're waiting hours just to check in. And then there was delays, cancellations because of crew shortages, weather issues, just a mess. And that's going to take a while, Chris. You know?
No, I agree with you, Dave. And that mixing pot is also going to be very decisive in people's decision and choices. So private aviation is going to go through the roof again.
I think so.
I think 100%, because now even the if you look at the experiences of people now with local airports and how quickly they can get in and out, the quality of FBOs, the quality of those in-flight services, and how much does it cost for time? How much does it cost for wasted opportunities? And people now are so missing their life that they're putting a different value on what's important. And coming back again to the pilots, I agree with you. There's so many of them thinking, I don't need this anymore. And even in the medical profession now, there's going to be a shortage of doctors, because lots of doctors now, they don't want to work the hours they were working before. In fact, a lot of them want to do it on a reduced hour basis. And so people are looking at the quality of life so much more than ever before. So, to travel, which is such a fantastic issue, I think whereby, and what you just said about the traditional businessman, I think, yes, there'll be a little dip off there, but I think people are fed up of Teams and Zoom, and they want to be in front of people again. So I think that'll have a little bit of a balancing. But I also think people like QR, who are investing now in new business formations and layouts in the cabin, I think they're doing the right thing, because people will pay more for that little bit of extra experience, and it'll be like the good old days, Dave. So it'll go back again to, Virgin's first flight back in '84, when, they were also saying, don't just play the game, change it for good. And they introduced a premium economy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Fusion, which you know more about. But, that's something that I see happening moving forward.
I have a friend down the street. He's a very wealthy real estate developer. And he could afford private, he could own his own plane, but he's always just taking Ryanair or Air Lingus. But now he's going private with his family, and it was COVID related, frankly, because he said, and I think once you do that, you get a little bit hooked. In fact, after my CNBC interview, one of the private airplane magazines that deals strictly with private pilots and FBOs reached out to me and wants to do a podcast, I guess, involving me about private aviation, which I thought was interesting. I interviewed him years ago when he was with a different magazine. So we'll see what he has to say.
Yeah, but I think, it's going to be an incredible purple patch for the private aviation side of business and people that can afford it, but also for people who always thought they couldn't afford it. But now when you take everything into consideration, it might be worth consolidating 2 or 3 holidays into one and having a real yeehaw, fantastic time and making those memories, you know?
What my twin brother does, he used to have an airplane, and when he hit the 5 year on the maintenance, he said, well, I guess we won't do it. We had 2 other partners. So he's on Netflix, and there was another one that he's on, Wheels Up, which he really likes. And they just went public and raised a lot of money. In fact, I think they did it not with a traditional IPO, but in any case, they have deadheads, as you probably know. So if an airplane's going one way, so they post these deadheads. So if you're fairly sophisticated and you're a member, you can log in, and if there's a deadhead to Palm Springs from the Bay Area, Brian finds out, and it's like, a 1/10 of the normal cost, because the airplane's got to go there anyhow. So you're basically paying for fuel and maintenance burden on the block hour basis.
Yeah, and with people now who've got a lot more time than they ever had before.
And some more money, Chris. I mean, everything I read says the banks are flush with cash. There's a lot of disposable income out there for all the different reasons, some good, some not so good. But people in general have a better cash position now than before. And between that and the pent-up demand and let's go this summer somewhere. What's going to be interesting is the fall. Let's see what happens in September.
Exactly. But people, spontaneity now and patience married together, there's some fantastic opportunities out there, which will be incredible. Now, talking about incredible, that's a nice little segue into Joe Sutter and with him and his team, as you said in the book, called The Incredibles. Do you want to just give us a little bit of update on that 747, the development phase and everything that he and his team did?
I've known Joe, who recently passed away in his 90s. When I first started with TWA, TWA had this management training program that I was in, and they wanted me to get involved with value analysis, which is flow charting and try to improve systems. And I went around Europe training management, but they sent me to a Boeing engineer seminar for just engineers at Boeing who were developing the final work on the 747. Yeah, just me and a bunch of engineers from Boeing. And that's when I first met Joe Sutter. And I became a fan of not just Joe, but the Boeing product. And then a couple of years later, I'm in LA working for TWA when the first 747 shows up. And I was so proud to say that I knew the guys that designed that back in the day, as they say. And then Joe went on to design the 737. He is the father of the 74 and the 737. And when I was at AirCal, we launched the first 737-300. And I remember flying with Joe on a test. It was a couple of pilots, our chief pilot, Joe and I, just a handful of us. And Joe's sitting next to me, and he said, "Do you feel that shudder?" And I said, "Actually, no, I don't." He said, "There's a slight shudder in the right engine." And I'm saying, this guy is I couldn't feel it, but look, the guy was a genius. I mean, he really, the nicest guy you would ever meet. So when we had the 787 rollout, we were invited, a bunch of other CEOs were invited. It was a beautiful weekend affair, and Joe was there. And Joe signed the book he wrote. I have it right behind me on the shelf here. And we continued to tell our war stories. And what he did for Boeing was unbelievable. And if you met him personally, he was the nicest guy. You'd think he was like a school teacher. Not that that's good or bad, but he was just a quiet guy, but he accomplished so much for Boeing. I have to be honest and tell you, from what I know inside what's going on these days at Boeing, I'm a bit troubled. And Joe would be turning over in his grave with the MAX problem.
Yes.
Part of that problem rests at the feet of Boeing. And they, over the past 10 years, they cleaned house a bit and with older, more experienced people. And I think that was a mistake. And to make another observation, which is perhaps on the edge of this discussion, but let me try, is that Jack Welch, who ran GE for years, had a management philosophy. Once a year, he cleaned out the bottom 10%. Everybody gets graded. We got graded American all the time, but you get graded on all these issues, and then the 10% were let go. And he did it like every year or two. Now, Jeff Immelt, who was an underling to Jack. I mean, Jack sent a lot of people out into the world with those philosophies.
Yeah.
One of them ended up running Boeing and took a lot of that cost saving and management style, which is not my style, but a style.
Yeah.
And took it to Boeing. And I think that might have been a problem. That's one guy's opinion. I'm not trying to obviously throw rocks at Boeing or anybody. I still love the company. I've been close to them for most of my career, actually. Very few with Airbus. And if you take the two, my experiences with Airbus versus Boeing, Boeing is far superior in product support. I mean, you can negotiate rates and costs and parts. And when you negotiate an airplane deal, you talk about everything from parts, engines, training. Hey, guys, throw in the free training. You can throw all the checklists and stuff in negotiating. And it's always tough. But the product support afterwards, when you have an AOG, airplane on the ground, they have teams that they send from Seattle and anywhere else, and they're on the ground with you almost instantly. Not necessarily just a crash, but if you have a serious maintenance problem, like our tail strike in Montego Bay with Air Jamaica, that was with Airbus, and it took a long time. And Boeing is just, I'm prejudiced, and I'll accept that, but it's based upon facts, not intuition.
Yes.
And Boeing will come through this. And, they named a chairman that used to be the CEO of Southwest, Larry Kilner. Great guy. And he's now the chairman. But it's sort of hard if you're in his position to, now remember, he's chairman of all of Boeing. So that's not just the commercial division. But that's aerospace, that's military. It's, so you got to rely upon the CEO of the commercial to really put things in order. And I hope that happens.
But Dave, in the book, you talk about, the MAX and the issue and everything, and about the investigation and the outcomes. But, looking at it from, obviously with the benefit of hindsight and everything, I mean, there was an awful lot of contributory factors that were just like either just below that line of acceptability or that line of verification. And that combination of so many contributed to the end catastrophic outcome. So all of those things now, I mean, you wouldn't think that they would still be happening in this day and age,
Well, they are. Just to give you my worldview on that issue, the reason that the industry continues to be safe and safer and safer, the statistics are phenomenal overall, is because we learn from every incident. And we send out advisory directives, we being the FAA and the providers, Boeing, Airbus, et cetera, to monitor issues. Like if there's a thin crack that somebody notices on the wing or in one of the fan blades, then it's reported and everybody has to check them. So the systems are really good. Here's what I think happened. I tried to dance around it in the book a little bit because I don't want to cast aspersions without all the facts. So I'm just going to say that up front. But having said that, between the feedback I get from inside the press, watching the CEO testimony, Congress and so on, and what I know about the industry, there's always pressure about the new models and whether, from a training point of view, you can do cross-training between models and how much training do you have? Do you really need to do simulators? And you can do what's called differences training, which is less expensive. So you go through all those issues, and then you've got the Boeings of the world, you got the airlines and their chief pilots talking about training requirements, and Boeing and every provider wants to keep the cost down and not have a huge burden on training, but at the same time wants to make sure there's adequate training. And I don't know that would have happened on certain carriers that are more focused on training than other carriers. And I don't want to, again, make aspersions about carriers around the world, but the training component was pretty important. And I think it would appear to me, as a guy on the outside, just to officially state that there appears to have been some corners cut. And I'm not the only one to say that, by the way. And that was a problem. And you can't do that in this industry. I've been in a situation a couple of times where with a carrier that was in financial challenges, and I was the CEO, and we missed an advisory directive. Now that comes with daily fines, thousands of dollars per flight. And the maintenance guy came to me and said, "Do you want to report it? Because the drill is you report." And I said, "Of course we're going to report it. It doesn't matter our bank situation or financials. we report it and we live the consequences. And that's what makes the industry safe. So I'm a strong believer in safety, taking the right protocols, the right training, the right follow-up, the right maintenance, and so on. And this was an unfortunate situation, which Boeing paid dearly for, I have to tell you.
Yeah, no, and I endorse that, Dave. I'm a big supporter of, SMS and safety and just culture and, being aware of human factors and everything. And I think it's so important. But what I also feel and see is sometimes, there's too much pressure being put on management and the teams with regard to IOSA audits and zero findings. As far as I'm concerned, if you've got zero findings, there's something wrong with the people who are supposed to be finding what's going on. And people should welcome findings because it helps you improve. And the other issue is, it's like when you stretch a huge big piece of elastic band, and you've got commercial pulling it one way and you've got operations keeping it firm on the other. If they pull that little bit too far or put that little bit too much pressure, it's going to snap. And when it snaps, there's a big fallout. And I think sometimes that extra time pressure, putting engineers under pressure for certification or whatever it is, how many hours of testing, how many hours of simulation training, all of those things combined, it's such a dangerous thing when you're chasing, the commercial benefit.
One of the things that came out in the news over the past several years about the MAX was this accusation, which I think was, let's call it generally unfounded, was that Boeing had people in the inside track at carriers representing them. Now, the fact is that carriers, as well as Boeing, has folks that are very highly skilled, maybe used to work for the FAA, and from a regulatory position are at least as accomplished for oversight. And they're, I think it's called DARs and so on. And these folks, they say, well, they're inside the tent, as it were, or, the fox and the hen house stories. But they are highly skilled, and you can't say that because they're working for either Boeing or the airline and not necessarily an FAA inspector. You got lots of FAA inspectors, by the way. They have their own credentials, but a lot of them have gone either private or so on, and they have the wherewithal, the paperwork, the education, the background to review the performance of airlines and Boeing. So to say that, these guys are all on the take, which was the inference, which is
but that's crazy. You can't.
Which is it's unfair.
I think it's not only unfair; it's unrealistic, because even if somebody wanted to orchestrate such a thing, the logistics behind getting everybody to do what was necessary, they'd be a successful management consultancy thereafter if they could bring that off.
I think the press smelled blood. Unfortunately, But they go for the headlines and the top headline, and they don't necessarily get all the facts, and they certainly often don't know what they're talking about.
No, exactly. Now, chartering the best course for the future obviously needs a lot of reflection, and you've had exceptional experience there. One of the things that you listed was you made a list of some of the innovations and inventions that have had a big impact on the business. And just to go through some of them, you had airfoils, gliders, jet engines, jet fuel, winglets, flight controls, aluminium and aluminium alloys, autopilot, landing gear, cabin pressurization, the black box, stealth aircraft, and then you also spoke about de-icing, and you also spoke about cameras, which brings us into biometrics. But of that list, Dave, which couple do you think had the biggest sort of that change momentum that stimulated either so many other things or brought in so many advantages that helped the industry move forward at that particular time?
Well, the list is extraordinary. It's very hard to list one over the other. If you just stand back and look at that list, it's overwhelming, all of these accomplishments over the years. And I think automation and automated pilots
Yeah.
is a big deal because it involved safety, fuel issues,
Yeah.
optimizing routes, and so on. So I would put that pretty high on the list. I mean, de-icing is a product of weather and so on. We've got a little bit better with glycol and so on over the years, but I mean, it's important, but that's not a game breaker. But some of the others are really extra. You know, now they have these overhead displays. So when you're in the cockpit, you look out the front window because they want to have visual. They want to be looking out all the time, right? So instead of going down for the dials and back and down, they have these displays in the front that are digital, very sophisticated stuff.
Incredible. Yeah.
So you can just look at there and you know the airspeed and the direction and all that sort of thing. So their winglets was also a fairly big deal. And you think about, let me give it a comparison. Wheels on bags. Why didn't we have wheels on bags 50 years ago?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why didn't we have Post-its 50 years ago?
Yeah.
But the wheels are so simple now. And you know, when they first came out, flight attendants used them and passengers. Pilots didn't want to use them because they felt it wasn't macho. Well, they'll all use them now, right?
Yeah.
So wheels on bags was an innovation that came about that should have been done hundreds of years ago. I don't even when railroads were around. But when you take a look at the winglet issue, we've been flying airplanes for 100 years. And then I know the guy that came up with the winglets, and he argued with Boeing for years about getting paid for his innovations. And for those that might not fully understand, it's, you know, you got the wing and you have the airflow, and the winglets are at the end that go tipped up, which most airplanes now have. And that improves the fuel burn on the airplane considerably. So the economics of that alone, and there was something that, I mean, the 707 didn't have it. The 747 didn't have it. I mean, the early airplane DC-9s, MD-80s, they didn't have it.
Yep.
And why not? Because if you look at aerodynamically today, why wouldn't you have thought of that? So those kind of things are going to keep getting better. I mean, you talk about biometrics, you know, that's going to improve in terms of security and passenger processing. And sooner or later, you're going to have everything from reading your eye to palm prints to facial recognition. You know, all that's the technologies there today. It's just mass producing it and making it happen. But I would urge everybody on that chapter 13 to really kind of go through that list and say, my gosh, this is an industry unlike any other that has innovation after innovation after innovation that improves the quality of the service, the economics, the safety.
Yep.
And there's more yet to come.
Yep. Oh, no, definitely a lot more to come. And do you know something? Talking about those winglets, I remember being at school and we had a competition to see who could get a paper aeroplane to fly the furthest and who could get the first one to go into this great big water barrel. And this kid, he was so good at making these planes, and he made a plane where he turned the tips up on the side, and it was a different shape to our basic one. And he always got it further, and he always got it into the blooming barrel. And I can remember going to see that, and when they came out thinking, my God, I wonder if that was him who created it. Obviously it wasn't, but some of these things, they're in front of you. And like you said about the wheels on bags, I mean, why would you not do that? It's incredible.
You know, I was just going through this list. I'm sort of cheating here looking at the list. You know, gliders were interesting. I talked about the wingless flight controls, obviously. The aluminum alloys that are now on the 787s and so on, the airplane is dramatically lighter.
Yeah.
And when Boeing gave me a presentation selling airplanes, they took a part of the skin of an airplane and they took a hammer and they banged it, and you could not make a dent or a crack in that. But the older airplanes, God help you, because, you know, every once in a while you get a bag cart that runs into the fuselage.
Yeah.
My God, you got problems. So that was interesting. The black box is pretty obvious. Cabin pressurization, I mean, where would we be today?
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, the newer airplanes, the 787 and the 380, has reduced the environment inside to about 6,000 feet instead of about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. And that's a good innovation. And of course, flight attendants have told me that on long hauls when they're working, they like to work the 787 or the 380 because there's less after flight lousy jet lag. It just So that's an innovation. So anyhow, I cheated a little bit.
Yeah, but that's okay. But when you included landing gear?
Yeah. I mean, there's an airplane, the 380, that is about 1.2 million pounds, max gross takeoff weight. Yep, so, I mean, there's fuel involved. So if you're going to land, it's less, right?
Yeah.
But think about the landing gear to land 1 million pounds.
I know, it's amazing.
And the tires and the wheels. And, there's companies that do nothing but repair landing gears. I mean, that's, in fact, we have a couple of them here in Ireland, one at the airport, 15 minutes away. And that's all they do. Some do just APUs, air power units, and others just do landing gear. But the sophistication of the landing gear, and it literally works every time. I mean, there's been occurrences where it hasn't. But the landing gear, so you look at the evolution, it's a great story in its entirety over 100 years of accomplishments. And if you just compress them into time, many of these have happened in the last 15 or 10 minutes of a 24-hour clock.
Yeah. No,
so now what's around for the future?
Yeah, so robust and so reliable. Now, the future, one of the worrying trends or the worrying things that's going up, and it's in society as well as just associated with an aircraft, unruly passengers.
Oh.
And it's, I mean, you go back to the first flights people had, like you in the book, you're talking about, businessmen, shirt and tie and hat and everything. It was a special event and all that. And now I think because it's open to so many and there's so much expectation on that flight and there's so much hustle and bustle, one of the things that I think they should have carried on doing, and they should still be doing at the moment, is I was on a couple of flights and it was COVID compliant. So what they said was, we'll board you in rows and we'll de-embark you in rows. That to me made so much sense, because when that little ping goes in the cabin and everybody just tries to get up and get their bags out, that's crazy. So that's one of the things that I think should have been carried on and be made to be a little bit more disciplined and make people be a little bit more patient. And
let me give you a couple of thoughts on that. Last weekend, 30 high school kids were celebrating graduating, I guess, and they were going down to the Caribbean from North Carolina. And they were absolutely beyond. They refused to wear masks. They were yelling and screaming on the airplane. No discipline whatsoever. Now, I have a couple of theories about that. The first one is societal. Yeah. I mean, the entitlement generation, they think they could just do anything. And nobody's willing to stand up and say, sit down, put on your mask. And by the way, we have this no-fly list, which I probably talked about before, and I've put people on the no-fly list.
Yeah. I agree.
Because if you do certain things, you don't fly on us anymore. Go fly on somebody else. We don't care. Yeah. But there are rules, and if you don't follow
share the no-fly list.
Too bad. We do, and in fact, just a little side vignette is in baggage services. Years ago, the industry, set up this industry worldwide where if you claim you lost a bag, right, you go into a system. We all have access to the same system.
Yeah.
And if you then go to British Airways and log for a lost bag, and then you go on American, you're in there. We find out. We've actually many, many times found people say, isn't it odd you've lost 3 bags in 3 different carriers in the last month? And they're like shocked when we deny the claim. So there's ways to track that sort of thing. But back to the no-fly list and the problems on airplanes, it's like recently, I think I read that it's up like hundreds of percent in the EU. Within Europe, the passenger behavior and altercations and being taken off airplanes is up hundreds of percent. Yeah, some of it's COVID, some of it's alcohol, some of it, but I think a lot of it, frankly, is an undisciplined youth. I mean, I hate to say it, but boy, you wouldn't have done that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I sound like an old guy, probably. But the discipline then versus now, I mean, where is the discipline? And they think they can get away with it, and too often they do. And it's a serious problem. The flight attendants bear the brunt of it, frankly, unfairly. Now, there's a little chit chat that came in a couple of days ago that The mask requirement in the US is due to expire sometime in the middle of September.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting debate, because Sarah Nelson, who heads the largest flight attendant union in the US, a pretty savvy lady. I don't know what her position is going to be in September. I know what it is now. Wear the masks, but between that and the other variants and the Delta variant and the bureaucracy and the politics, I don't know what's going to transpire. But I observed in Palm Springs 2 months ago. I was waiting to fly up to Oakland on Southwest, and this is Palm Springs. You think it's kind of a nice environment, but this guy got off an airplane screaming and yelling. Good-looking guy in his 30s. His wife was trying to contain him. He was out of control. He said every curse word right in front of me. I actually filmed it. And the cops came in to take him away. And of course, everybody in the holding room clapped, because the guy was absolutely beside himself. He accused the government of everything from being communist to intrigued. I mean, just, and the curse, and there was kids in the holding room too.
I think people have shown how much they care about their fellow human beings with the NHS and the health and the doctors and aid workers and frontline workers, and it's been absolutely incredible, and it should continue to be applauded, and it should continue to be remembered. But at the same time, there should also be a little bit of a drive to bring back better care and consideration for others, and not just all this frustration, and try and make people be a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more patient, and definitely a lot more considerate of others, and not be so bloody rude and obnoxious. And at the same time, those that have to clean it up should clean it up toughly.
Well, it's called civility. And Chris, I'm troubled by our futures in terms of how we educating the youth of today. In fact, a TV show a week or two ago showed an interview in Washington. They interviewed about 44 different questions of about 15 college kids.
Yeah.
And they asked them everything from when was the Declaration of Independence signed? When did we break with England? When was the Civil War? And they said, oh, we got the independence with the Civil War. And then somebody else said, oh, that was World War II. It was with the Brits in 1776. And nobody got it. Nobody. Out of 44 questions, 3 got the history questions right. 3. So what's going on in the educational environment today?
There's a lot going around on social media, my friend, and it's a lot worse than that when it comes to they even asking people what's the capital of France, and somebody said Germany and things like that. So I think the fact that the States is such a big, I mean, it's country, every state is a country, and they're self-sufficient. People don't have to know too much about the outside world, which is, sometimes you think maybe they're better off if they don't, but also it's no excuse. And some of the things that people don't know that they should know globally, it's embarrassing.
Well, consider this, and I may have mentioned this in the book, or at least chatting with you, is you put people on an aluminum tube at 36,000 feet for 10 hours or even less. And no matter the time frame in the past 50 years, when people walk into an airport, they're different because they're a little bit more sensitive. You just watch them. I mean, I've lived with it. I mean, a third of my life I've worked in airports, and you watch the temperament and attitude, and sometimes the fear, and then drinking, and all those things combined. And then now you got to put a mask on for 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, and can eat or can't eat, and so on. So that's all heightened the sensitivity and the reaction of passengers, not justifying it, but that's what it is. And I don't know the easy answer to that. I think it is continuing discipline and follow the rules on an airplane, but you don't fly, or you get arrested. End of story. And if you don't like that, don't fly on us. And I'm a really tough guy when it comes to that. I've put guys on the no-fly list and gals. And one person called me and he said, why did you do that? I said, why did I do it? Because of what you said and what you did on that airplane. You're not welcome anymore. Herb Kelleher did it when somebody complained in writing to Herb at Southwest about a flight attendant who happened to be one of the best flight attendants Southwest ever had. And Herb took exception to that. And he put him on a no-fly list. He said, you're not welcome on Southwest any longer. And then he posted that on the billboards for all the Southwest employees. You think Herb wasn't a hero? I mean, that's a Herb Kelleher style in any case. But he didn't take any nonsense, and nor should anybody else. And people that criticize the industry that don't understand it, and they'll take a video of the passenger on an airplane because maybe he's being dragged off, and whether they did it right or not, the cops come in, and I've had as many as 10 cops come in Miami pulling off a really, really drunk guy. And I thought it was a slow day for the police in Miami. The Dade County people were there, and the airport police, and it was craziness. But if you'd have filmed that and given it to a network and cut it and spliced it, it would look like, oh my God, how are they treating this guy?
Yeah.
Well, if that guy showed up on your front lawn or in your restaurant, you wouldn't take it that way either. So there's social media has something to deal with here too, Chris.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, David. There was something in the news where an innocent guy was stabbed up in London, and people who were trying to help him, they were being impeded by people who were coming around with their cameras and stuff. There's some basics now that people need to start to reflect on, and I think also those that are providing service should be a little bit more courteous. They should enjoy what they're doing and try and bring that sense of fun and excitement into everybody's experience. And then, so it's a two-way sort of thing, but I agree, there's definitely got to be an injection of finer disciplines and finer rules and guidelines now moving forward. Otherwise there'll be it's going to be an open bath, and people will just be jumping in when they shouldn't and not realizing they're in the deep end. Crazy. Listen, we're nearly at the end, so we haven't had the chance to talk about trade wars or environment on this particular issue. But what is important now, and albeit it's chapter 13, which one could say has been unlucky for the industry because of what's happened after the book was finished with this damn COVID, but we've still got the opportunity to have a look at a couple of areas in the book. So we can have a look at the epilogue, which is good. Then you've got the acknowledgements, you've got the Appendix A, which we can flip in and out of because we've already mentioned that. But Appendix B and the Gaelic, I like that, and I like the reference to Ireland. And there's many people I know, especially one who frequents Gibney's on a regular basis, Mr. Ray Hazley, who always says there's only two types of Irish: those that are and those that wish they were.
Yeah, amen.
And, so I think you know what I'm talking about, especially down in Gibney's. But coming up, some of the points that I think we'll be able to splice into those few areas is the info about your personal life in aviation, some of your business and leadership philosophies. What would you do differently? Personal wins and losses, people most admired and why, and also industry wins and losses and government failures, which I know you're quite outspoken on. But also from me, I would like to, get some of the things that made you have the biggest smiles when you look back on your life in aviation, and also perhaps the longest frowns, and most importantly, the fondest of memories. So that's how we'll finish. That's how we'll close. So I think we've got probably 2 or 3 good sessions left in us. And then who knows, Turbulence 2 or Turbulence tomorrow.
I can assure you, Chris, that all of those items that you mentioned that we're going to be talking about over the next few sessions will be very provocative. Good. In some cases, eye-opening, in some cases, brutally honest. And it is what it is. Yeah. And I'm of the age and level of experience and position now that I'm afforded that latitude. Yeah. And I intend to use it and hopefully educate people the way I wish I had been educated in my 20s and 30s and 40s. My dad died when I was 25. So I really never had a go, and he was a successful executive, but I never had a go-to father to go to. So when I talk about some of the people I most admire, you'll see that because maybe they took the place of my father, or in some ways gave me the sort of guidance that I was lucky to have, and hope that maybe I can give guidance to some others to make them successful. That would certainly make me happy.
No, that's a lovely way to end, Dave. And also, some comfort there as well, though, is about you being a twin. And I know you and your brother are very close. So maybe we'll cover a little bit about, what are the benefits and shortfalls of being a twin.
How many sections or how many segments can we use for that one?
Yeah. No, I was going to say I can think of a few definite ones.
Yeah.
But no, but it'll be good. I'm looking forward to that, and it'll be a nice way to to bring it to an end. But I got to say again, anybody that's looking, it's a really good book. It's great fun, and it's also gives you a picture of the way life was, the way it could be, and hopefully, the way it will continue after this damn global issue we've all been through. So keep safe, my friend. Look forward to seeing you again, and I'm looking forward probably more on these couple of sections than going through the book, because I've had the chance to read it, whereas I don't know some of the answers to some of these questions. So
I might surprise you, Chris.
I'm sure you will, sir. I'm sure you will. And we'll also link the CNBC
interview yesterday.
We'll link that with this as well, David. So that'll be good as well.
Great. Thanks.
Enjoy Dublin. Hope to see you there soon. Long overdue pint of Guinness and a little meal in Gibney. So take care, and I'm really looking forward to that day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Cheers, my friend. Bye.